A top focus this morning, the interim budget this election year. Finance Minister P. Chidambaram will present a vote on account this morning. He will be giving an estimate of funds required to meet expenditure until a new government comes in place later this year. Mr. Chidambaram is expected to give a report card on the economy for the last 5 years and elaborate on tax collection. No major tax announcements likely, but the government is likely to announce some incentives to move voters ahead of elections. But there are worries that the Telangana protest could interrupt the vote on account presentation. Lots of big questions to be answered. Joining us now, a very special panel, Dr. Sanjay Baru, Director Geoeconomics and Strategy at the International Institute of Strategic Studies. Importantly also, someone who's been with the Prime Minister's office in UPA 1. He was media advisor to Dr. Manmohan Singh. Also with us, Swapan Dasgupta, senior journalist and columnist. Also joining us this morning is Vivian Fernandes. He is someone who's been extensively tracking budget for years, senior journalist and associated with the Network 18 group. Also joining me, Sumant Sinha. He is founder, chairman and CEO of ReNew Power Ventures Private Limited. So all bases covered. Also joining me from Bangalore, TV Mohandas Pai, chairman of the Manipal Global Education Services, co-founder Areen Capital. Just to say that if you, the viewer, have any questions to our panel this morning, just log on to ibnlive.com or tweet us at ibnlive, and we will take all your questions in a moment. Before I come to the panel, I just want to go to this question of Telangana. Will the finance minister be allowed to table the budget in the first place today in Parliament? Will Telangana protest derail Chidambaram's speech? I want to go straight to Parliament because our correspondents Karma Paljor and Maria Shakil are there. There are some reports that we are getting at the moment that the BJP is saying they will only allow a discussion on Telangana if the MPs who are suspended are allowed to come back. Can you give us more details on that, Maria? What are you hearing? Will the Telangana protests derail the FM speech?
Rajdeep, let me take that question to CM Ramesh, TDP MP from the region. Will you be allowing the vote on account, Mr. Ramesh?
You see the today newspaper. If I found the constitution is misused, I am the first person to burn it. Dr. Ambedkar told this quotation. We are raising our voice. It's not a disturb. They have to revoke our suspension, our MP suspension. Then they have to tell this is not introduced. Then we don't have any objection. Otherwise, we have to raise our people voice in the House. This is the only way.
Mr. Ramesh, even as we speak, there is a meeting that is going on. Your ministers are meeting LK Advani. There was a meeting that was held between Rajgopal and LK Advani yesterday. What are your demands? You are specifically saying that you want the suspension of the 16 MPs be revoked and then only the vote on account will be taken up.
It is a pity. Congress minister is approaching Advani. Then who will save this country? Only Advani have to say no. Congress, the suspension of our MPs, only Simandra MPs. You see the partiality, how they suspended. There are so many members are in the well, so many was beaten MPs. They are not taken, only Simandra MPs taken. Our point is today, main thing, they have to revoke the suspension and they have to tell this bill is not introduced. Then we don't have any objection.
So you are saying only if the suspension will be revoked, then only the vote on account will be allowed. That's what you're indicating,
yes,
sir.
Yes.
But
that has been decided by all Simandra MPs. That has been decided by yesterday's meeting. And Congress ministers met Advani. You see how the Congress they are behaving.
So clearly you heard Rajdeep, the stage is set, one would say, and there would be disruptions when Mr. P. Chidambaram in fact goes ahead with the vote on account.
Karma Paljor, I want a quick response. I'm told that the alternative is for the finance minister to actually read out the speech in the Lok Sabha television studios, that he may not even be in Parliament to prevent the disruption of his speech. Is that a real possibility now?
That's what they are looking at, because I have Mr. KJ Alphonse of the BJP with me. Mr. Alphonse, is there a possibility that the finance minister could read out the budget from the studios of the Lok Sabha TV?
Well, one thing is very clear, that the BJP will not be obstructing the parliament in any way, just like we have not been obstructing the parliament for the past 10 days, or we don't obstruct the parliament for any reason at all. So we are very keen that the finance minister presents his budget. Now, it would be a great shame if the finance minister is not allowed to present the budget by his own Congress MPs. I mean, the government should do something to prevent these rowdy MPs from stopping the parliament from functioning. I mean, it's all the Congress MPs themselves who are doing it. Why can't the government take action? I mean, we are ashamed that the government is not able to stop its own MPs from stopping the parliament from functioning.
Right, we were talking earlier, you said there is a possibility that he'll present it from the studios of the Lok Sabha TV. They have a studio inside Parliament where we are. That's a possibility. If he does that, what will be your reaction?
I mean, it will be a great shame that the finance minister of the largest democracy has run away from Parliament and present his budget from a studio. Of course, that would not be presenting the budget before the people of India.
Are you getting any indication of that?
Well, going by what has been happening in the Parliament for the past few days, where the government has shown its inability to control its own MPs.
Right.
So I think this possibly is what is going to happen, because government has shown its complete inability to control its own MPs.
Right.
I mean, it's a complete anarchy in the Parliament. The only people who are sitting there quietly is the opposition, the BJP MPs.
Right.
And we've been saying, come on, get things going.
Certainly.
You have
Take your
6
point.
anti-corruption bills, so-called famous bills, which you are keen to get through. Please get through those bills. We are keen to vote on those.
Right.
We are supporting them.
Okay, okay. So they don't. And Rajdeep, since morning we've been here, we're also seeing a large police presence around. You know, some protesters expected here too. So that will also be something that we'll watch out from.
Okay, let me just get a quick response also for the man who started all the trouble. The pepper spray MP, as he's now being called, Lagadpati Rajgopal, is with Maria Shakil. Quick response I want. Mr. Lagadpati Rajgopal is among the MPs who has been suspended, Maria. What are these MPs planning today? They used pepper spray the other day to make their point heard. Are they again going to try something which will, in a sense, give them the front page headlines that they so desperately want?
Let me take that question to Lagadpati Rajgopal, sir. On Thursday, you used the pepper spray to disrupt the parliament. You ashamed the parliament on Thursday. My question today is that you have already been suspended. Who will be taking up the issue of Telangana in the House?
Before going to that, just see this hoarding. Rahul Gandhi said, Choda nahi jode, which means don't divide, unite. That's exactly what we're asking for. And then they speak something in the hoardings and they do something in the parliament. And that's the reason we protested. Our own union ministers, all of us are protesting. Just implement what you are saying on the hoardings. That's exactly what you're saying.
So who will be taking up the issue in the House today?
Yes, our union minister, Mr. K.S. Rao, Palam Raju, Chiranjeevi, Purandeshwari, Suryaprakash Reddy, and Harsha Kumar, Bapi Raju, Jhansi Lakshmi.
So they'll be disrupting the vote on account. You're saying that?
8 of them are there. They're going to object to the undemocratic way the parliament is being functioned, the way the government is trying to bulldoze things, you're trying to use their brute force. Physically, they try to assault member of parliaments, and the way they try to selectively suspend only Andhra Pradesh MPs without taking any action against various MPs who are in the well, and also the way they introduced the bill, which was never introduced. Just Speaker and the government together, they try to show as the bill has been introduced, which was never introduced. So they're going to raise their objection to all these things, and they're going to definitely protest in the well.
Yes, Rajdeep, please go ahead.
Just one quick question. Is he telling me today that union ministers of the Manmohan Singh government will disrupt the budget of the Manmohan Singh government? Is that what Lagadpati Rajgopal is saying, that the ministers of this government, Pallam Raju, Chiranjeevi, Purandeshwari, these are ministers in the government. Is he telling me today that ministers are being asked to go to the well of the House to disrupt the budget of the finance minister? Straight, direct, quick question.
That really looks like the strategy. Now you are saying that it will be the ministers of Manmohan Singh's cabinet that will be disrupting the House today.
They have been in the well for the last 3 days. This is the 4th day they're going to be in the well. In front of Sonia ji and Manmohan Singh ji.
But they haven't been suspended. So you are saying that after the suspension of the 16 MPs, it will be the ministers, Pallam, Raju, Purandeshwari, who will be taking up the issue, and they'll be in the well of the House.
Not only them, there are a whole lot of other people are going to support them, because what happened on 13, the way government tried to push through things in a undemocratically by the brute force will not be tolerated, will not be accepted.
So you are saying essentially about the ministers, just specify that.
Yes, ministers and a couple of other MPs will not be suspended. They'll take it forward, and they got a lot of support from various quarters, various opposition members. All of them are very, very angry the way government is trying to push through in the last session of the parliament, that too in the voter account budget session.
So Rajdeep, clear indications coming now that will be the ministers who will take the center stage today.
Okay. Thanks very much to Maria and Karma. Let's look at that for a moment. We have the original Telugu bidder in a sense. Dr. Baru, I know you this is an issue which you have a strong view on. But the very fact that today you are going to perhaps have an unprecedented situation where ministers of the government are going to go to the well of the House to protest against their own government while the vote on account is presented. What does that tell you about the way this entire Telangana issue has been handled?
Well, you know, Rajdeep, the focus, in fact, in my view, should no longer be about disruption of parliament. It's really about the dissolution of the Congress party. Andhra Pradesh was the bastion of the Congress. Even in the emergency, when the rest of the country voted Indira Gandhi out, we in Andhra voted Indira Ma back. Y.S. Rajshekar Reddy brought Sonia Gandhi and Congress to power in 2004 and again in 2009. Andhra is one of the bastions of the Congress, like Gujarat is the bastion of the BJP today. And you see in this bastion of the Congress party a complete, implosion. Congress fighting itself. I mean, this is serious consequences for national politics. It's not just about disruption of parliament or creation of a separate state.
You know, the interesting aspect, Swapan Dasgupta, is the BJP stand. There's been a feeling that the BJP at the moment is playing a double game. They're running with the Andhra hare and hunting with the Telangana hound. Today, interestingly, Congress ministers, as is being pointed out, have gone to Mr. Advani to get his support to also ensure that the Telangana bill is not discussed in parliament. Are you getting a sense that effectively every political party has an eye on the elections? It suits the BJP not to take a stand on Telangana so that all its options are open after the elections?
No, I think such an impression would not be unjustified. I think what you are seeing as far as the BJP is concerned is that Mr. Advani is on one page, which is his page, and then there is a party which is on another page.
What is the page? What do you believe is the BJP stand on Telangana?
I think it's quite clear that there is one section of the BJP which says that they should go through with the Telangana proposal, but they have a caveat which says that let's have it in an ordered way. Okay? Mr. Advani, on the other hand, feels that apart from the vote on account, there is nothing more to be done in this parliament.
That's right. So there are two different views.
And I think you're quite right in saying that there is a degree of incoherence. Now, whether Mr. Advani represents the BJP or represents himself, or whether the others represent the BJP is a matter of conjecture and speculation. My own feeling is Mr. Advani's views are that of his blog.
Okay, we're going to leave it at that. At the moment, clearly Telangana is going to shadow this budget. But let's come to the budget itself. And let's look at the first question that I want to pose, which is that, is this really a budget in the truest sense of the term? Can Mr. Chidambaram really do something in this budget that would give it the kind of distinctiveness that a union budget generally has? Vivian, let's get the position right. Vote on account. Is it limited to simply an expenditure of what the government needs to clear the salaries essentially of government employees over the next 4 months till the actual budget comes in June, July? Is that what it is according to you? Does Chidambaram have any elbow room in today's budget?
No, he doesn't have an elbow room in terms of announcing any kind of expenditure beyond what is required to keep the government functioning for, let's say, 4 months. Normally, a vote on account is for 2 months. It happens with every budget because the demand for grants are voted in the second half of the budget session. So till that time, to keep the government going, the vote on account is taken for 2 months. But in the case of an election year, because there might be difficulties in getting a government together, normally, a vote on account is taken for 3 or 4 months. The legality and propriety demands that the government does not make any kind of direct tax changes. But in 2004, just one thing, in January, 1 month before the interim budget, announced a whole lot of excise duty concessions and also customs duty concessions. Chidambaram has said that he is going to make some changes in indirect taxation. But of course, nothing is going to be done as far as direct taxes are concerned. He might allow the surcharge on high net worth individuals, 10% or something, to lapse. Because 3 things are done in the vote on account. You have the demand for grants, you have the annual financial statement, and you have the finance bill. These three things are presented and then they're voted.
Do you see, Sumant Sinha, any elbow room for Mr. Chidambaram? Given that, the fact is Mr. Chidambaram has been keen to somewhere stamp his authority on North Block, on every budget speech. Every budget speech that Mr. Chidambaram has done so far, he's tried to stamp his authority. This is his 9th, but his first interim budget. Do you believe that he can do something that is perhaps, gives it a distinctive nature?
I think it's very difficult, Rajdeep, simply because of the fact that this is a vote on account and there is a strong sort of precedence to this activity. And it's really just, as Vivian said, a demand for expenditure over the next 3 or 4 months.
Could he not extol the achievements of the UPA over the last 9 years? Use this as an opportunity to say, look at what the UPA has done for the economy. Maybe look at figures of UPA 1 and pass it on to UPA 2.
No, if Rajdeep, if that's all that he does, if extolling is all that he does, that will be, I think, not a bad exercise from the market standpoint. I think if he uses it to make any populist giveaways at this last second, it didn't work in the case of Mr. Jaswant Singh in 2004. It probably won't work at this point. So therefore, why just fritter away any more sort of cash in trying to do anything populistic? Hopefully he will not do that. The other thing is, he's also said consistently that he's going to hew to 4.8% fiscal deficit. And that is ultimately what the market is going to be looking for most fundamentally.
You know, what are you going to be looking for, Mohandas Pai? Is there any anticipation, or is this, as some are describing, simply a routine exercise that we in television are trying to build up because it's election year?
Well, Rajdeep, I would say I'm looking for maintenance, and I'm looking for 4 important things. One, what is the economic growth estimate that is going to take into account for his fiscal deficit? 2, very important, how much money has he cut from the planned expenditure to bring the fiscal into account? 3rd, how much subsidies is he postponing to the next year for the new finance minister to take care? And 4th, what are the steps he's going to take to make sure that the tax assessment processes, which have hurt the corporate sector for the last 3 years, is he suggesting any reforms? So it's just a maintenance budget, no high expectations. He cannot do much in this budget, and he just had to send a signal that he's in control. He's keeping his promise about the fiscal deficit. That's all.
You know, do you believe, Dr. Baru, it's as limited as that? You were reading out from the Constitution. Are you clear this is constitutionally mandated, that he cannot take any decisions which would impact the budget of 2014-15? Are you suggesting that he is constitutionally mandated not to take decisions, or are we saying that it is convention that he will not make any major policy announcements?
Well, actually, the Constitution defines the vote on account essentially as giving the government the right to continue spending. It does not define the vote on account as a budgetary financial statement that gives the government right to raise taxes. But Vivian is right, 2004 was the only exception. There was one other earlier exception somewhere in the 70s. Don't forget.
But can he dole out some giveaways? Can there be giveaways? Can he send out a statement?
Well, as I said, 2004 was the only real exception in recent memory. No finance minister has ever done anything significant on the revenue side in any vote on account. But many finance ministers, including Dr. Manmohan Singh in 1996, have used this budget presentation of the vote on account as a policy statement with the election in mind. I was just reading Dr. Manmohan Singh's 96 speech, and it's all about the protection of the hand and the hand that has guided you. So the hand figures a lot.
It's interesting because they lost the 96 election, so it didn't really work. I mean, let's be clear. Do you really believe this can have any electoral impact, Swapan Das Gupta? Can Chidambaram say something which can in any way give a sense that the UPA is in control of the economy, which is the critical question?
You know, the point is, I think it's too late to have a fundamental change as far as the electoral calculations are concerned. I think people will be interested in knowing the manner in which Mr. Chidambaram is able to package the fiscal deficit. And I think whether that's a slate
Is it about
of
a number? Is it about a number? Is it about basically showing that I have stuck to 4.8?
Exactly. He will be trying to show that. And that was the question is the slate of hand which is involved. Now, just one point I just want to disagree with Sanjay is in 2004, the Jaswant Singh SOPs were detached from the vote on account. In a very technical sense.
You're saying he gave it before the vote on account actually came.
Exactly.
Mr. Chidambaram has not done that.
Mr. Chidambaram can, hypothetically, make announcements which are valid from today till 31st March. And he cannot do anything beyond that.
Yes, Rajdeep, I just want to make a quick point that I don't think it's just a matter of a number. I think it's the credibility of the number which is important, because everybody, as Mr. Sinha said, everybody is going to be looking at the fiscal deficit. But it's not enough if he just produces some sleight of hand and creates 4.8% of GDP. I think India's credibility is at stake. Internationally, nationally, investors, everybody is looking at the credibility of fiscal management. And I think Chidambaram has tried, in fact, in the last 6 months to cut spending. So he would try to suggest that this number is a credible number, but he will be evaluated on that score.
Let me just take a break, because I want to look now more closely at that question. The fiscal deficit and indeed the handling of the economy by UPA-2. Has the UPA-2 government failed on that critical question of the management of the economy? Let's look at that question when we return. We'll also bring you figures, in fact, from our election survey that we did on how the UPA is faring in public perception when it comes to the economy. Back in a moment.
दिल्ली में बैठी हुई सरकार पता नहीं उसको क्या हो गया है, पूरे देश में रुपया गिर रहा है क्योंकि इंपोर्ट का प्रॉब्लम है। उस समस्या को समाधान के लिए क्या करना, तो उन्होंने कह दिया कि रात को पेट्रोल पंप बंद रहेंगे। कोई मुझे समझाएगा कि रात को पेट्रोल पंप बंद रखने के हुक्म से रुपये में ताकत आ जाएगी क्या?
I'm glad that he is beginning to take an interest in the Indian economy. As he takes more interest, he will discover that there is much more to learn. First, they have to unlearn a lot and then learn. So when the debate is joined, we will debate them.
Welcome back. Just ahead of the vote on account, let's raise that big question now. Has the UPA government mismanaged the economy? I think that is the critical question that many are raising, and it's a question that we've raised in our tracker poll as well. And I can tell you, generally, the people believed that the UPA government had mismanaged the economy. Is that a no-brainer, Sumant Sinha, that the UPA government has mismanaged the economy in UPA-2? Would it be fair to say that that is the general perception in the markets, among investors, among the people at large?
No, I think absolutely it is, Rajdeep, because, if you see what happened in UPA-1, they were averaging about 9% GDP growth. I think, there were a lot of macroeconomic mistakes made by the government, in addition to all the other scams and what have you that came out during the same time period. I think it's a given that most policy making came to a halt, decision making came to a halt. And really, it's only in the last year and a half since Mr. Chidambaram took over again that at least they've got the macroeconomics pulled back into some degree of order. And fortunately, they did that just in the nick of time, because had that not happened, in the recent bout on emerging markets frailty, India probably would have tanked again, and the rupee would have probably gone from 60 to 70. So I think it's really helped over the last year and a half, but they haven't been able to get the microeconomics of the whole situation right. All the issues around coal block allocations, all the issues around lack of governance in terms of policy paralysis, that still continues. And unfortunately, I think until we get a new government, most people seem to have written off this current period of time. And I think now everybody is just waiting for the next 3 months to finish so that we actually are able to get a good positive government.
Let me take that to Mohandas Pai. Is that the sense you get, that this is simply a waiting period? Most people have actually given up on the UPA government when it comes to the handling of the economy, and that really is the overarching sentiment among investors, among industrialists, among corporate India? Okay, I think we are having a problem with this line. We'll try and go back. Is that a sense you get, Vivian? Among the Aam Aadmi, does the Aam Aadmi feel the same way, particularly with food inflation still in double digits?
Inflation, of course, is coming down, but
still remains high.
That is true. I mean, the CPI is about 8% and wholesale price index has come down to 5%. But the perceptions are so strong that even though the government has jolted itself into activity since June last year, when they set up the Cabinet Committee on Investments and also the Project Monitoring Group, and about 300 projects have been cleared, worth about 5 lakh crore rupees. So despite all that, the perception, negative perception of the government is so strong that nothing that the government does will help redeem itself. And one more point, Rajdeep, is not only in the second term that the UPA has performed badly, even in the first term the UPA was not doing well. It's only because of global, the economy was doing well, that the Indian economy also rose with the tide. I remember attending...
So you're not going to give a single silver lining?
I remember attending Chidambaram's post-budget sessions, and when industry was asking him to do much more, he would say, he would inverse cause and effect and say, because growth is happening, government is working. It's not the other way around.
No, let me get Dr. Baru to quickly respond to that before I go back to Mr. Pai. Is there a sense that even in UPA 1, this government's economic performance was grossly exaggerated and benefited from global factors? This is what is now the argument which is being made at the end of year 10, in a sense. Or do you believe there is a distinction between UPA 1 and UPA 2?
Absolutely.
Clear distinction.
Clear distinction. There is absolutely no doubt. The global factors did help. And it's possible that, without doing anything, we may still have had 5-6% growth in that period. But the fact that you had 9%, and don't forget, it was driven by the highest rate of savings, which went up to almost 35% in that period from 2003. The turnaround of the Indian economy started in 2003, in the last year of the BJP, and then went on right till 2008, GDP going up, and savings rate went up to 35%, and investment rate went up to 37%. So it's not just global factors. Domestic investment was going up, domestic spending was going up, the manufacturing growth was high, exports were high, 30% year-on-year export growth. The Indian economy did remarkably well. And
what is the difference?
I will tell you the difference. There are two differences. One, there was so much hubris about this that in 2009, after the global crisis, when India survived that crisis, we actually assumed we were insulated from the world economy. We thought that whatever was happening in Europe and the US would not negatively impact us. We thought we were already like China, that there's a domestic growth was enough to sustain. And therefore, we neglected taking very difficult decisions on external management as well as the fiscal deficit management.
That's one.
That's one. And the second, I think the political hubris, that 206 seats, Congress is back in power, we can do anything we like and there is no price to pay.
2014 is a done deal, we can live with sort of coalition pressures, all of that sort of came to haunt
a lot of the difficult decisions that should have been taken 2010, 2011 were not, and then the downslide started, and Chidambaram has not been able to arrest the downslide. 1 year back, I wrote a column saying that it's time for elections. I think this government should have gone 1 year back. It would have been good for the economy.
You want to respond to that, Mohandas Pai? Do you believe that the real problems of this economy stretch back to that critical period between 2009 and 12? I mean, those were the 3 years, really, which were the years of the missed opportunity. Ironically, when the finance minister was who is the man who is now president of India? Or is he the convenient whipping boy?
No, I don't think it's convenient. I agree with Sanjay Baru totally, Arnab. Rajdeep, and I would say that in the UPA 1, the total borrowing was only about 9 lakh crores. And in UPA 1, the left made sure that the UPA did not do anything to harm the economy because there are no new policies. In UPA 2, they had a majority of their own, and that led to borrowing going up to 24 lakh crores. The mismanaged economy in UPA 2 is started with Pranab Das' budget and the retrospective amendment to the Income Tax Act. It started with high inflation of 10% a year for the last 5 years. It started with perverse assessments the last 3 years, which destroyed the tax system. Arnab, in the last 3 years, investment has come down, savings has come down because of high inflation. Investors have lost faith in this country because of perverse tax investments. The government has set very high targets for tax collection to our tax administration, and they are resorted to perverse tax assessment. 21,000 crore demand on Nokia, 10,000 crores on Shell, 20,000 crores on Vodafone, 6,000 crores on IBM, some 3,000 crores on Microsoft. Where are we going, Arnab? So UPA 2 economically has been a disaster. They mismanaged the economy totally, and the next government will have a hard task on his hand to bring it back on the rails.
Okay, this is the problem when you are on times now from 9 to 10 and then on CNN-IBN from 10 to 11, but we will live with that. Mohandas Pai, you make important points. I think it's critical, Swapan Dasgupta, to look at that. To look at the fact that are these 3 years, the 3 years between 2012, the 3 critical years by which the UPA 2 in a sense is being judged in 2014, that 2004 to 9 was a very different UPA. I mean, if you compare the vote on account that was given just before that government and look at the mood of the country then versus now, it's almost as if there are 2 Indias compared to what the mood was in 2009.
And let's look at what's the difference. And I think Mohandas Pai made a very important point. He said the presence of the left in UPA 1 actually prevented decision making. In other words, you persisted with an existing set of reasonably okay decisions which had continued. The moment the Congress got into what it seemed like a majority, you had the inevitable conflict between what is now being called Chidambaram versus the NAC, etc. That led to a far more damaging paralysis and a set of policy moves which resulted in fiscal profligacy. And it was fiscal profligacy plus a lot of veto decisions.
But it's hubris. I think the word the good word that Dr. Baru used there was a sense of complacency, of arrogance.
No. It's not complacency. It was an attempt to reshape politics using flawed economics.
Was it really that?
No, it was that. It wasn't merely a question of
the kind of conflicts that we saw. The kind of conflicts that we saw, perhaps, that the Prime Minister perhaps was unable to manage. The conflict between the Coal and the Environment Ministry. The conflicts that existed within this government, all of which came to the fore in that critical period of those 3 years between 2009 and 12. Is that the price that the UPA is paying today when I look at these numbers?
I say hubris because this argument that you could use the government to, in fact, shift politics in the way they did was born out of the confidence that there's no price to pay. There's no political price to pay, there's no economic price to pay. And that's the kind of arrogance or hubris we like to call. And I think the government underestimated the long-term consequences of a lot of things that they were doing in that period. And frankly, I don't think Mr. Chidambaram has been able to reverse that in any significant way.
Was it too late for Mr. Chidambaram in that sense, someone to act that by the time Mr. Chidambaram came back, there was a sense that all he could do was really crisis management. He wasn't in a position to do anything more than just ensure that the situation didn't reach a stage where we were seen as junk.
Well, to answer your previous question, Rajdeep, I think the issues that manifested themselves in UPA 1 actually came out finally in UPA 2. For example, the coal scam, the telecom scandal, all of those things actually happened in UPA 1 and came out in UPA 2. And I think fundamentally there was an absence of leadership. There was no really strong hand that was actually bashing different ministries together. So you don't agree with Dr.
Baru that all was well in UPA 1? You believe that UPA 1 was well packaged and perhaps the crises were bound to emerge and they emerged in UPA 2?
No, actually there's a whole set of things that have gone wrong over the last 10 years. I think in UPA 1 there's an absence of governance. There was good macroeconomics only because of the global bank wins. I think in UPA 2, a lot of those things came to roost. In addition to that, we had all the fiscal profligacy that Swapan was talking about. And all of those finally manifest themselves at a point when Mr. Chidambaram took over finally. It was really too late. But give him credit for the fact that we actually could have fallen over the cliff, which we almost did. It's only, I think, with the appointment of Raghuram Rajan at the RBI and Mr. Chidambaram's drawing these lines in the sands on the fiscal deficit, on the current account deficit, that we've finally been able to get some semblance of order, at least macroeconomically. Otherwise, there would have been massive capital outflow from India. We would have lost our credit rating. All of that could have also happened. At this point, we're still teetering on the edge. We haven't actually made it this way or that way. And that is why the next government is so critical, because if we don't get a good government and a stable government, we will actually start facing all of those issues all over again. And US Fed tapering is still not behind us.
Yes, you want to
two quick points. You know, with benefit of hindsight, we can all sound wise. But look at the annual analysis of the Indian economy from 2004 to 2010. World Bank, IMF, international agencies, you look at any written analysis, nobody at that time was questioning what was being done. This business that, things were wrong even then and now we are paying the price, nobody said it at that time. right? So now we can look back and say things were wrong in UPA 1 and we are paying a price on UPA 2. The fact is, in UPA 1, everybody at home and internationally thought India was on the right track, which is why we had this illusion that we are catching up with China, we are the next superpower. I mean, look at all the illusions about India rising.
So was it an illusion? Was that figure an illusion?
Let me make a second point. The second point is that this so-called correction of the fiscal deficit and current account deficit that's been done in the last 1 year has been at the cost of growth. You've squeezed spending. And it's true, this was a priority. The government had to bring the current account deficit down, stabilize the rupee, bring the fiscal deficit down, and therefore this 4.5% growth. And even the estimates for next year are below 5%. So you squeeze growth in order to stabilize the economy. That's the price we have paid.
Quick response, Prabha.
I think the government is responsible for its own hype. Sanjay Baru says, quite rightly so in my view, that UPA 1 good, UPA 2 bad. Okay? Now, that may have a certain basis in economics and statistics. But look at the packaging the government has. Look at the manner in which the government has been packaging itself. They've been packaging itself that there is one continuum right from May 2004 to today.
In fact, that's what we expect from Mr. Chidambaram today. I mean, he's got all the figures that he's been giving in the last few months. Pankaj Pachori is sending the Prime Minister's new media advisor is sending tweets, all of which are of the last 10 years.
10 years.
I mean, he's averaging out the last 10 years.
When that 10 years, when the statistics of the past 10 years is compared to the real lived experience of today, it sounds far more depressing than it actually is. So they are guilty of trying to make a spin, and that spin is not working.
But it's not going to work.
Okay, let me take one final break before we go back to Parliament, because the big question that we will raise is what is the one thing that we would like to see from Mr. Chidambaram today that will give a sense that the Finance Minister is very much in control of the economy and will perhaps hand over to the next government an economy which is in good shape. Let's take a break and come back with that question when we return.
We do not believe that the slow growth will come to stay where it is today. We have every intention to use all policy instruments to push up the growth rate, and it is our expectation that in the next 2 or 3 years, the economy can once again bounce back to a growth rate of 7 to 8%.
Well, thanks very much, Rajdeep. We're here at the Confederation of Indian Industries National Committee meeting, which, by the way, is a coincidence that it's happening on the same day as the vote on account. Let me get in comments from industry. May I just point out here that the buzz is about Arvind Kejriwal, and he's expected to be here later this afternoon to unveil the AAP's economic agenda. So the buzz really is about Arvind Kejriwal, not so much about the vote on account and Mr. Chidambaram. Chris Gopalakrishnan, President of CII, what are the expectations as you go into the vote on account? Do you expect him to make any more announcements as far as populist schemes are concerned, small or big bang? Do you expect him to tinker at all as far as excise, etc. are concerned? Any relief for industry, or is this likely to be a plain vote on account?
I believe it will be a plain vote on account because the flexibility that he has is very little. He would, of course, talk about his achievements over the last few years, especially in the last 1 year, where he has been able to control the fall of rupee, stabilize the rupee. He has reduced current account deficit. So I think he will talk about those things. He may give some directional statements about the future, what you can expect, and and mostly about achievements. I think it will be about achievements.
So it's going to be a performance appraisal. In terms of relief, there's a lot of buzz, Pawan Goenka, that the auto sector, your sector, might get some relief. Are you hoping at all that there could be any benefits that could come to the auto sector, for instance?
I don't expect anything which is across the board. There might be some tinkering with few things here and there, but I don't think there is enough room or a desire at this point, being a vote on account, to make any major changes. Therefore, I'm not very hopeful that major help will come for the auto industry.
So in terms of intent, if he were to signal intent that by some stroke of luck, the UPA were to return to power for a third tenure, what is it that you think he will highlight?
Well, first of all, I do think that he will talk a lot about intent, because in a way that becomes an election speech.
Yeah.
That if we were to come back to power, this is what we will do.
So you're expecting an election speech?
I am expecting that, and what I would hope for...
Infrastructure, employment, aspirational India, what do you think is going to be the focus?
I think it will be the fiscal structure and aspirational India. Employment will become a part of that.
So in a sense, the shift from Aam Aadmi or entitlement-based schemes to more aspirational India?
See, I think it is well understood by everyone that you cannot do things for the Aam Aadmi unless there's economic growth. Only if you have wealth can you distribute wealth.
Yeah.
And therefore, the focus has to come on that. The 6% growth that he has talked about often for next year, he has to set an agenda on how that will happen.
Whether or not the next government takes that agenda forward is a different story. Janmejay Sinha, Vinay Chatterjee said that the UPA2's legacy can be, he's coined an acronym for it, DPLS, Decision Paralysis-Led Slowdown. Do you think that is what UPA2 will be remembered for?
Well, I think, I think they may unfairly be remembered just for that, because if you look at it, they have done a little bit more than that. But I hope in his budget, he does talk about future direction, and he does talk about bank recapitalization to get infrastructure back.
Infrastructure, do you believe that there's going to be an announcement in terms of we're going to do 10 big infrastructure projects that will lead to job creation and so on and so forth?
I think he will talk about cleaning out all that is stuck by creating the committee and show performance, and also say that it will require further bank recapitalization, which his government will do, so that we get back to 6-7% growth.
Rajiv Memani, what do you really expect from the finance minister? In the last manifesto as well, the Congress had committed to the goods and services tax. The Congress blames the BJP, specifically Narendra Modi, for sabotaging the GST. The BJP says the Congress did a poor job of negotiating with state governments. Do you believe, whoever comes to power, the GST is likely to be a reality over the next 2 years?
I think so he will definitely mention, I think GST was something that they pursued, but because of, I think, issues on both sides, it didn't go through. I do hope that GST becomes a reality. I think it really, if you have a government which is strong at the center, then there is likelihood that GST can be pushed. I guess some little bit of the state autonomy and everything else that was being taken away may have to be, so it may have to be a slightly more flexible GST, yeah. Or there may be more optionalities in terms of which states to go will go and which states won't. So they may try to do it the way VAT was introduced. So something like that may come, but I do hope that GST comes in.
But let me ask you, this is the 9th budget that Chidambaram is going to be presenting, one short of Morarji Desai's record of 10 budgets. He's a man who's brought in things like the fringe benefit tax, he brought in the tax on the super rich, and so the agri waiver, all of that. What will Chidambaram's legacy be in North Block? What do you think Chidambaram will be remembered for the most?
I think
the dream budget of 1996-97?
Yeah, he was, but I think if you actually connect from 2004 onwards, I think the way the tax rates have been reduced, trying to get in a lot of fiscal discipline. I think when he left in 2008, 2009, India had one of the lowest fiscal deficits. The tax to GDP ratio had declined, had improved significantly. The current account was in decent shape. I think he did a great job in ensuring that India didn't get impacted as much by the Lehman crisis. And I think in the last 1 year, given the constraints of growth, because unless you don't have growth, unfortunately in the last year, your expenditure is committed out.
So one thing that you think Chidambaram will be remembered for?
I think for his very strong focus on getting fiscal discipline.
Okay.
And standing up and taking hard decisions and taking them through. I think, yes, he's introduced lots of taxes which all of us don't like.
But this was a government that went back on the FRBM Act.
We were talking more of Chidambaram.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay. Chris Gopalakrishnan Chidambaram's legacy. This may in fact be his swan song.
So how he brought things under control over the last 9 months, actually, from June, July, when rupee was actually fluctuating widely. I think he stepped in and brought discipline into the system, brought confidence back. I think that's again a demonstration how he has control over the situation from a finance perspective.
All right, so there you have it. Running low on expectations here. Corporate India expects a plain vanilla statement of accounts from the finance minister. Doesn't really expect him to announce any populist schemes, populist measures. Full marks coming into Chidambaram for at least trying to bring the fisc back into some sort of shape as far as the last 12 months are concerned, Rajdeep.
Thanks very much, Shireen, for that perspective from leaders across industry there at CII. Let's ask our panel what they believe will be Chidambaram's legacy. What do you believe, Mohandas Pai? What will Chidambaram be remembered for? How will you look back at Chidambaram's, as is being suggested, 9 budgets now, 8 budgets, first interim budget. What's Chidambaram's legacy going to be?
Well, his legacy is that he brought the tax rates down and gave impetus for growth in the first phase of his finance ministership. And his legacy is that in the last phase, he stood up for what he believed in and brought the economy back to control, like many people said. I think he's a strong man of India in the finance realm. He understands global economics. He understands what makes the economy tick, and he's willing to stand up and take tough decisions. And he's a man you can believe when he stands up for it. But also, Rajdeep, he has left a bad legacy behind, which we have to talk about, and that is he has set very high targets for the tax collectors, and because of very high targets in the last 2.5 years, there have been too much of perverse tax demands. 1,50,000 crores of transfer pricing claims have been done, and the tax department seems to have gone berserk in taking money from people. So he has also been responsible for not reversing the long-term damage to the Indian tax system because of perverse demands and high tax targets.
Right. I'm giving 15 seconds each to all my panelists. The one thing you'd like to see from Mr. Chidambaram in this vote on account, is there anything you're looking forward to at all?
I think the only thing really, Rajdeep, here is what happens on the fiscal deficit and how credible is that number.
Vivian, what?
I think Mohandas Pai was thinking that he'll meet the fiscal deficit by rolling over. I don't think that is going to happen because already a finance minister official has said that all the 4 installments of subsidies, fuel and food will be made in the budget. It's just that for the last quarter, the fuel subsidies are paid in the next quarter by convention, and that's going to happen this time as well.
So, in a word, what I'd expect from him is ruthless honesty in letting us know exactly where India stands economically at this juncture. If that means saying that actually the fiscal deficit is much higher than you've stated, so be it.
Dr. Baru?
Well, I mean, on election eve, I don't expect ruthless honesty, but I certainly expect some credibility in terms of these numbers. And
it's a fine line between honesty and credibility. You can be honest and be credible at the same time.
You asked, what do we expect?
Sure. The honesty is one way, to be seen as credible.
No, I just said I don't expect ruthless honesty.
Ruthless. You expect honesty without the ruthlessness. Measured honesty is what we expect. Okay, we'll wait and see what the finance minister does. Importantly, we'll wait and see whether he's allowed to actually give his budget speech in Parliament, or will history be created that this will be the first time a finance minister is not allowed to present his budget inside Parliament. The Telangana tangle. We'll have a look at that when we return and go straight to Parliament. Welcome back. In just a moment from now, we will be going to Parliament. Remember, Parliament starts at 11 a.m. The Finance Minister expected to present his last budget of this UPA 2 government. But will the budget be allowed to be actually read out inside Parliament is the big question at the moment, because the Telangana MPs, including, or Andhra MPs, including union ministers, are promising to block the budget, which will be an unfortunate day really for Indian democracy, Dr. Baru, if this is what this interim budget goes down in history as the first budget where the finance minister was not allowed to read the budget inside Parliament because the Andhra MPs, including ministers, blocked it.
Well,
because it could be a precedent for the future. Tomorrow any group will decide that we will not allow the budget speech to take place because the budget can then be read out in the Lok Sabha TV studios.
Well, first of all, there's no reason for a finance minister to read a budget speech. You know, the fact is that all he has to do is to go to Parliament and table the finance bill and take a...
Are you saying do away with the convention of reading out the speech altogether?
You know, frankly, budget speeches are not part of any procedure, parliamentary procedure. The finance minister by constitution is required to go to the Parliament for authorization of his spending and revenue proposals, which he has to do simply tabling the bill.
Are you saying get rid of the practice of the speech altogether?
I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is it's not an important part of procedure. Today it has become important because of live television. You know, he's on TV for 1 hour.
Let's just go and listen to what happened.
Subsection 1 of Section 7 of the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act 2003.
Madam, I beg to lay on the table of the House papers mentioned against me and serial number 2 of the today's revised list of business.
Actually, just to explain to our viewers, is perhaps for the first time, all that the finance minister has done is he has laid the papers of the union budget on the floor of the House, which means that he has decided not to read out the speech inside Parliament.
In serial number 3, today's revised list of business.
Madam Speaker, with your permission, I beg to lay on the table of the House papers listed against my name in today's revised list of business.
All right. Shri Jyotiraditya M. Scindia.
Respected Madam, I beg to lay on the table of the House papers listed against my name at serial number 5 in the revised list of business for today.
I'll get back to you. Says that, you know, he needn't, and he can practice his elocution from the Lok Sabha television. I think that's also a pretty unfortunate development.
You know, Rajdeep, there were two precedents. One was in June or July 2004. Manmohan Singh was not allowed to reply to the debate on the motion of thanks to the President's address. And then again in July 2008, he was not allowed to reply to the debate on the vote of confidence, right? On two occasions, he could not speak in Parliament. Now, he could have done what Chidambaram wants to do, which is to go to a studio and read out whatever he wanted to say. But on both occasions, we had a written reply of the Prime Minister, which was released to the press. So the media got hold of what he would have said if he had been allowed to speak. But this business of preventing a person from speaking has happened before.
No, I know, but you know, the unusual nature is it's being prevented by government ministers. I mean, never in the history has happened. You know, Prasenjit Bose, left economist and someone who's been closely associated with the CPIM joins us. Is that what is troubling you? That today you are in a situation where government ministers of the government of India can go into the well of the House and prevent their own finance minister from reading out the budget speech. What does that tell us about UPA 2?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that first of all, it's extremely, cynical of the government to have postponed this Telangana issue till the last session of Parliament. I mean, this was asking for it, basically. They have pushed it to this far. They should have resolved this issue long back. Now, this kind of a bedlam is taking place. And I think somewhere down the line, the principal opposition party is also a party to, creating this kind of a situation. But why aren't they allowing these people to be, removed from the floor of the House? So both are contributing to it.
Floor of the House.
No,
they have been suspended.
No, hold on. 17 MPs have been suspended as Swapan, but the 8 ministers are still there.
Yeah.
The fact
can you blame the opposition? Why are these people ministers?
No.
This is the
main blame is to the Congress, but the BJP is also ensuring. BJP is also ensuring that the Parliament gets disrupted.
You see, I can understand your desire to have an even-handed condemnation of all bourgeois parties.
Yes, but yes. So this is a vindication. What is happening to Parliament is a vindication of the critique of bourgeois democracy.
Yeah, exactly. So
is this the way?
Lenin's argument that Parliament is a pigsty.
Not necessarily. It need not be a pigsty, but it is definitely a defunct Parliament which is not doing anything substantive and meaningful for the people. It's more than evident.
I think beyond that, the seriousness really comes from that. that surely the Treasury benches should be able to manage their own flow. And I can understand the opposition disrupting Parliament repeatedly, but we've seen this through the session. Presumably for the world of the markets, it will make no difference, Sumant Sinha, whether he reads it from a Lok Sabha studio or whether he reads it from the floor of Parliament. Am I correct?
It doesn't make any difference, but the reality is that ultimately you have certain conventions. There's a certain sort of level that Indian democracy has, and every time we set the bar lower and lower and lower. And so that's really what is disappointing in this whole scenario.
Vivian, does it trouble you as someone who's a student of political economy? The finance minister doesn't read his speech from inside Parliament and will read it from the Lok Sabha studio. I come back to it. It sets a precedent now. It gives every speaker now in the future, whenever there is a session, and we've had numerous sessions which are repeatedly adjourned, will say, Finance Minister, please read it out from Lok Sabha studio.
Not just the fact that this has been obstructed, but even the fact that there has been no debate happening on very important issues. That is something which is certainly troubling for all of us.
Yeah, you see, the vote on account in any case doesn't have to be debated, unlike a union budget. But as Dr. Baru is pointing out, tomorrow maybe the Prime Minister, in the future, if he's stopped from making a speech, will say, I'll go to television and give the speech through a television studio. So it won't happen inside Parliament in the future. You gave a couple of examples where Dr. Singh was prevented from making speeches. Maybe in the future, the next Prime Minister will do it from a television studio.
Absolutely.
In a sanitized atmosphere.
Which is a tragic.
Let me see if Pallavi Ghosh is with us. She's going to join us in a moment because clearly that, in a sense, there's a story within a story as we wait. And that's the interesting thing about budget days. Usually there's always a backstory. Today's backstory is turning out to be Telangana. Mr. Mohandas Pai, if you're still with us, does it in any way change the way, Prasanjit, this budget will be looked at? I know you're blaming the opposition also. The fact is the opposition, though, has not disrupted Parliament. The main disruption has taken from the government.
I know.
I think you've got to concede that on this occasion.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the UPA 2 government, we don't even know whether there'll be a UPA 3, but the UPA 2 government has much to be, to worry about. But what is the desperate need for the finance minister to even have that speech in the Lok Sabha TV studios? He can give all the journalists the papers. Those papers will be now in the market. It's now a public document. Why does he need to even make this speech in Lok Sabha TV studios?
Just to have you, spend your time on television. Frankly.
So therefore, that's all that it's boiling down to. Because it's an election year, the finance minister wants to reach out.
Chidambaram has been remarkably successful in ensuring that the mud thrown at the UPA government does not stain his kurta, his very white apparel. And I think this is going to be part of that exercise.
So this is Mr. Chidambaram trying to sort of showcase his achievements as finance minister.
Absolutely.
And he's entitled to that. He's perfectly entitled to do that. But Pallavi Ghosh, what exactly is happening there in Parliament? How soon will the finance minister now speak and give his budget speech in the Lok Sabha, on Lok Sabha TV?
Well, but government sources are still telling us, Rajdeep, there's no clarity yet on whether he's actually going to be making that vote on account speech, but that's an option which certainly the government has looked at. The point is that, technically speaking, the interim budget, the vote on account has already been placed on the floor of the House, so it's now a property of the Lok Sabha. The details of that budget, of course, will be made public when you get a copy of that speech, but whether he is going to be physically going there and making that statement in Lok Sabha, there's still no clarity yet. But interestingly, Kamal Nath, the Parliamentary Affairs Minister, did a short while back did tell reporters that one can always present the budget on any of the channels, which could also include Lok Sabha, but that would again be something which is very, very unprecedented. And then of course the question will always be asked, and is the UPA now trying to showcase what it calls its achievements in an election year?
But they're perfectly entitled to do that. Let's be clear. I mean, are we clear that the finance minister is perfectly entitled to to do his last? I mean, he wants to go down. He's coming ever closer to Morarji Desai's record of 10 budgets. Why should he not have the opportunity?
But frankly,
let's listen in. The finance minister is speaking again.
Hence, it is pertinent to say a few words on the global economy as well as on the global risks. World economic growth was 3.9% in 2011, 3.1% in 2012, and 3% in 2013. Those numbers tell the story. Among India's major trading partners, who are also the major sources of our foreign capital inflows.
that this House approves the recommendations contained in para 76.
Okay, so there we have the finance minister finally being allowed to deliver his speech amidst the din. We thought that he wouldn't be allowed that privilege and that he would have to go to Lok Sabha TV. But Chidambaram showed that he has strong vocal cords, quite apart from anything else, and was able to speak above the din and actually spoke for about an hour. So it was, in a way, Mr. Chidambaram's, perhaps some believe his last stand. Others believe that this was his moment to lay out all the achievements of the UPA government over the last 10 years. Do you believe he was successful in that? Has he been able? What's the big takeaway for you, Dr. Baru, from what you heard?
Well, the big takeaway is that Mr. Chidambaram has told us that if he had been the finance minister for the entire 10 years, the economy would have performed better. Because he did say that the only time that the economy took a knock were the 2 years when somebody else was the finance minister. He did say that he unblocked all the projects that had been blocked by his own government, and therefore he should be given credit for ending the policy paralysis which the government has been accused of. So in some ways this is, I would say, a very personal speech of Mr. Chidambaram, saying that, look guys, I did a good job. If I had been allowed to continue to do this job, things wouldn't have been this bad. You threw me out of the finance ministry, brought somebody else there for 2-3 years. You know, that's the basic message.
But along with that message was also the message of the UPA government, Swapan Gupta. He says that over the last 33 years, annual growth trend growth rate was 5.3%. From 94 to 2004, it was 5.9%. 2004 to 9, it was 8.4. 2009 to 14, it was 6.6. So he was talking up the achievements of the UPA government, believing that we have often seen the glass as half empty. But actually, according to Mr. Chidambaram, the glass is half full.
Well, Mr. Chidambaram presented a version of the Bharat Nirman ads in prose. And I think...
Is that being excessively cynical?
No, I think it's being excessively accurate. But I think what is more important is that this was a political speech. You can hardly have expected him to do otherwise. And to a very large extent, this political speech was personal.
It was almost as if Mr. Chidambaram was trying to sort of give his own report card.
You see, this 10 points which he laid down.
That's right.
For the economy. You know, I don't think there's going to be much, it's not very contentious. But the point which has to be examined is to what extent, in the past 5 years, in the past 10 years, the UPA government has deviated from it. And I think the first point, to talk about the fiscal consolidation, I think we'll find the most marked deviation from the fiscal responsibility bill under the UPA. So on the very first count it falters. Now what Mr. Chidambaram is saying, that I personally am committed to it. I think what he did not do was he did not marry his personal commitment to what is the existing political reality of his own government.
Okay.
And I think that's the question which will be asked, and that's the question which is being asked all the time.
Vivian, your headline point. What's the headline? If you were tomorrow giving the headline, what's the big headline? 4.6% inflation, fiscal deficit to be pegged at 4.6%.
He's abided by the red lines that he set for himself when he accepted the Kelkar Committee report in October 2012 on fiscal consolidation.
Is it a slate of hand, or do you believe it's genuine?
Even though there is a rollover of 35,000 crore, I don't think, it is going to change very much the 4.6% target. At the most, you'll have 4.7%, but it will still be below the 4.8%
so it's not a slate of
red line. I mean, he has been able to overachieve. 4.7% is what we expected, 4.6% is what is done. Secondly, I think, he is also, like Prime Minister Manmohan Singh in his press conference said that history will judge him. So this is also a budget speech made with an eye on history, because he's made various things for various voters.
Okay.
But I don't think those are going to reward him. So basically, this is a speech made to redeem himself.
I take the point, because, there have been various promises that ironically, the ex-serviceman met Rahul Gandhi only a week ago, and now suddenly a long pending move, one rank, one pension comes through. So there will be questions about whether it required again Rahul Gandhi's intervention for Mr. Chidambaram to make that statement. But Sumant Sinha, given what you had expected in the morning, has Chidambaram more or less stuck to what you would have hoped for? Are you satisfied? 4.6% fiscal deficit, generally giving a sense, in his words, that the economy is under some kind of control, is what he seemed to suggest. The worst is over, appeared to be one of the messages.
Yeah, look, I think that Mr. Chidambaram, and I've said this earlier also, with some degree of contentiousness here, I think that over the last year and a half since he's retaken over this ministry, he's actually been able to get macroeconomically at least the country back on some degree of track. And you know, if you notice what he's also done is he's talked about not just this year's fiscal deficit of 4.6, but he's also said that next year's fiscal deficit is likely to be 4.1%. So he's laying out a path forward as well, which hopefully again is meant to placate and keep at bay any sort of international vulnerability that we might be looking at. And you know, to me, lastly, this seemed, you know, there was of course a vote of account here, but there's also a bit of a vote of thanks here from Mr. Chidambaram, in a sense almost signing off and giving the thanks to
I think
the
that's
Prime
a nice
Minister
word. The vote on account turns out to be a vote of thanks. That could be a potential headline by a clever headline writer tomorrow morning. Before I come to you, Prasenji, I just want to go to Meera Sanyal of the Aam Aadmi Party now candidate from South Mumbai. Meera Sanyal, do you believe that there was something in this budget that made you believe that the UPA 2 has addressed what it claims is its core constituency, the Aam Aadmi?
Well, let's put it this way, Rajdeep. I think it was certainly a valiant attempt by the finance minister, not just to rise above the din, but I thought his, analogy of standing at the bridge of a sinking ship was very apt. So certainly, this is a finance minister to be commended for trying to do his best under very, very difficult circumstances, whether that be the chaos in Parliament or the catastrophe that the UPA government has been.
Okay, Prasenji, do you also agree with that the finance minister has done a valiant job in very, very difficult circumstances?
No, I don't agree with that at all. I think that first of all,
I would be surprised if you did, but go ahead.
I think what the finance minister tried to project, I mean, I think it was almost like an election speech, that the entire achievement of the 10-year record of the UPA government, I think that people, when they're going to vote this year, they're not going to remember what UPA government achieved 4-5 years back. What has been the record of the past 2 years? Low growth, very low growth, and very high inflation. I think that is really, and whatever the finance minister said, you
didn't accept the figures that he gave out of inclusive growth.
He claimed that today I am witnessing 5% growth. Today I am witnessing job losses. He is saying, look what we have achieved 5 years back. How does it matter?
So I think
and inflation on the inflation front, what he is saying is he's just he's forgetting about the fact that this government has presided over the highest and most sustained period of double-digit food price inflation ever in the post-independence history, longest bout of food price inflation. So I think that forget about that. I think that he's just making claims, but I want to flag one important issue.
Yes.
People are talking about, his sticking to the fiscal deficit red line, etc. I would like to point out how is that being achieved. Look at what last year there was a there was a revenue shortfall last year. There was a huge cut in plan expenditure to the tune of 90,000 crore last year, in which is capital expenditure, public investment, asset creation, all has suffered. This year, same thing has happened once again. The plan expenditure last year, whatever it was, this year he has just pegged it at the same level. So in real terms, there is actually a shrinking public expenditure. Is this the way the government intends and his vision to bring out the economy out of this mess? I think it's a completely flawed vision.
The worry, of course, would be that had he raised the amounts and raised the expectation, you would have probably come back, or others would have come back and said that this is a finance minister who has no clue of fiscal consolidation.
A finance minister who is failing to raise revenues.
Yeah, but let's be honest, this was a limited exercise. This was a limited exercise with very limited
I'm talking
objectives.
about what he achieved last year.
Okay.
What Mr. Prasenjit Bose is saying is that why didn't he squeeze for more taxation?
That's right, but
which you cannot do.
Which he couldn't have
today
done.
in a low growth situation you cannot do. So let's not ask him to do what Pol Pot did.
Okay. Hold on. Let's take a break. I'm going to ask all my panelists to rate the vote on account. Was it a vote of thanks, as is being pointed out, or was it something more? Has he sent out a message that might at least revive in some way flagging hopes in the UPA government among even their supporters, or has he simply had a very tough task which he has made a brave attempt to try and paper over the cracks? Let's take a break, come back with the ratings of Mr. Chidambaram's vote on account in a moment from now. Okay, so there you have the finance ministers. The big takeaways, let's rate the budget as we often do, but not so much the budget, but let's rate the finance minister himself. Since this is, in a sense, we are calling it the vote of thanks, not just a vote on account. Meera Sanyal, rate the budget for us. Good, bad, average, excellent. Rate the finance minister, sorry for us. Rate the finance minister. How would you rate Mr. Chidambaram, who's now delivered 9 budgets, including this one interim budget?
Well, I think the finance minister would probably be rated around a 3 or a 4. It's very difficult to rate this budget. It's really a non-budget in that sense, Rajdeep.
Would you have rated, sir, sorry to
intervene. People have said.
Sorry to intervene. Would you have rated it differently if you were not an Aam Aadmi Party candidate from South Mumbai?
And with Royal Bank of Scotland.
No, in fairness, I wouldn't have. As I said, Rajdeep, I think that the finance minister has inherited a very, very difficult situation. But, you know, I find the argument that, you know, we've done a good job to be a very, very weak one when every single indicator points to the contrary. And, you know, when you talk about saying that I'm going to control the fiscal budget at 4.1%, this is nothing more than a sleight of hand. We all know that there is, spent expenditure of over 1,45,000 crores, which is going to be rolled over in 2014-2015. What this government has really done is left a scorched earth, which any other government is going to have a very, very difficult job dealing with. So, to be quite candid, this is not what we would expect of a government with economists of the stature of Chidambaram, Manmohan Singh and Montek Singh Ahluwalia.
So average,
very, very weak job.
Okay, average to poor, I presume, is what you're therefore suggesting.
Yes.
Dr. Baru, has he left a scorched earth for the next finance minister? How do you rate Mr. Chidambaram over the period of time? I mean, we're now looking at him over 9 years, not just today.
Well, I think certainly I would rate him good over 9 years. I mean, I don't think he's been a bad. I mean, given the choice, he's not bad. He's certainly not an average. Chidambaram can never be an average person. He's always a man of extremes. Some people like him, some people hate him. But he's done a decent job. And as I said earlier, I think his own view would be, if he had allowed me to continue to do my job, I would have done a better job. You know, he claimed...
Do you agree with that? That those were the 3 wasted years when Pranab Mukherjee... Because, you know, here is the finance minister, as you're saying, openly suggesting almost that it was the 3 years or 4 years when Mr. Pranab Mukherjee was in power was where the economy lost, lost its compass.
I mean, he made 3 comments. One, he said, we will restore stability and we will never do anything to hurt the foundations of the economy, right? So he's in a sense saying we had done this before and now he's promising...
And there's no policy paralysis, almost to suggest that there might have been.
Policy paralysis, but he said we have unblocked, we removed the obstacles to hundreds of projects. So that means you concede there were obstacles, right? So there was a policy paralysis. So he's actually saying there was policy paralysis, there were problems. I undid all of that and now I put the economy back on even keel so that whoever inherits this has an easier job.
So, upon too little, too late, how do you rate Mr. Chidambaram over this period of 9 years?
Well, I'd rate him as average. And the reason for that is that when Mr. Chidambaram came into office, at least in this term, he inherited an economy which was growing at around 9.5%. And when he demits office and perhaps ends his political career, because I understand he may not be even a candidate in the coming election, he's leaving behind an economy which is growing at less than 5%. In his admission, he says...
Are you only going to judge him by those numbers, or are you going to judge him by the fact that he had a very, very difficult job when he took over 18 months ago?
Mr. Chidambaram, we are not going to judge Mr. Chidambaram by the fact that he attends office diligently. We are not going to judge Chidambaram by the fact that he is a very articulate man, that he means well. We have to judge Mr. Chidambaram by what he has delivered. And the point is that it was under Mr. Chidambaram's watch, no doubt it was not exclusively under his watch, that a lot of the distortions which have plagued the Indian economy took place. So he cannot necessarily be exonerated from it. The reason why he's not being marked bad, in my view, is that at least he was aware that these were distortions and he did his limited best to try and contain it.
Many would
to that extent, he he mitigated the sort of inheritance.
You know, the last man standing. Many have called him the last man standing on a sinking ship. I mean, how do you rate him, Vivian, as a result of that?
Rajdeep, you know, I have a great admiration for Chidambaram, and I would rate him the best minister in the UPA in both terms of the UPA, not just as finance minister, but also as home minister. He's done an excellent job, number one. Number two, he embodies everything that the Congress or the Nehruvian model stands for. This man is inclusive. He doesn't believe in the Lal Batti culture. In fact, you know, he's that way.
Are you allowing your personal like of Mr. Chidambaram to be somewhere confused with his handling of the economy?
No, I'm giving you reasons for this. He's you know, more Aam Aadmi Party than Aam Aadmi itself in the sense that he might be arrogant, but he does not stand on ceremony. And people think that he is, you know, he's pro big business, he's pro investment, and one should never forget that he started as a trade union leader. He's very diligent. He's the only person who believes in reforms, and he also believes, you know, though he sounds distant, doesn't seem like very caring, he also cares for the poor.
And yet, in pure numbers, he will go down as someone, as a finance minister, who when he was... You're saying it's the baggage of the past. He suffers from the baggage and the burden of the past, and his fellow ministers, many of whom you see as incompetent or
or for example, the fiscal, what you call the stimulus which Pranab Mukherjee gave, 3.5% of GDP, was perhaps required, but I don't think Pranab Mukherjee as finance minister believed in reforms, because as president, when he gave the address to parliament, he said, I do not believe in trickle down.
So you believe Chidambaram was a much more instinctive reformer? You know,
I think he's calling him a right man in the wrong dynasty.
Well, that's your right man in the wrong dynasty. Swapan, is your view of it. Sumant, you know, it's interesting. I've just got a message that one of the things that you're overlooking is that, you know, you've got a situation, the super tax on super rich not extended. He could not have made any change in direct taxes. But it's worth mentioning that the tax on super rich not extended. He's allowed it to lapse.
One more point, the indirect taxes changes, the excise duty changes are only till the end of June.
Yeah, but he's stuck to that convention. He's not in that sense broken with convention. But Suman, how do you rate him?
Well, you know, I rate him in two parts. I rate him average for UPA 1, because I think he had the opportunity of doing a lot of structural good for the country, for the economy, and he did not do enough at that point in time. What he did achieve at that time was the fiscal deficit going down to 3.5%, which is good, but not good enough. And I think that's really where a lot of the ill started from. But I think post Pranab Mukherjee's tenure as finance minister, I think when Mr. Chidambaram came back, at that point, actually, he's done a fairly good job. Because he had very limited headroom at that point in time. The economy was, as I said earlier, right on the brink, and we could have really gone pear-shaped over the last year and a half.
That's an interesting way to put it. That actually in the last 18 months, he's been the right man at the right space. I mean, even if he's in the party which Swapan believes is the wrong party or wrong dynasty, he's been the right man at the right place. And maybe he should have been brought in earlier.
Exactly. He probably shouldn't have been removed at all to begin with, as Dr.
That's
Baru
right. I mean, that's the tragedy of having Shivraj Patil perhaps as the home minister, and then you needed a strong home minister. So, you know, he was the man for all seasons for the Congress party and the UPA. Prasanjit, how are you going to rate
well, I think there is a merit in looking at the tenure as UPA 1 and UPA 2, because I think UPA 1 had actually, you know, the economic situation was far different, I mean, completely different.
How do you rate it?
I think the UPA 1 government, including the finance minister, I don't want to use that, but I think he was fairly good, I should say.
He was good in UPA 1?
Yes, because
So that's exactly the opposite of what Sumant is saying, who's actually believes that he was much better in the last 18 months in handling a crisis.
He is looking at it from a different point of view. I'm saying...
No, he managed a crisis. He managed a crisis.
Hang on, I don't think he managed the crisis. I think in UPA 1, why am I saying in UPA 1 he was good? The economic was doing well. If you look at the kind of, you know, mandate that the UPA 1 had, I think the tax GDP ratio went to the highest level. He was not being Pol Pot, by the way. He was being Chidambaram, but the tax GDP ratio reached its peak under UPA 1 at over 12%. And he could spend, and I think that's resulted in the 2009 victory also. I think UPA 2, I don't want to demarcate between Pranab Mukherjee and Chidambaram. I think UPA 2 faced a difficult time because of the global economic crisis, but they messed it further and further by getting their diagnosis of inflation wrong. They have been rising interest rates. It has further hurt growth. Inflation has persisted. I think both Chidambaram and Pranab Mukherjee as finance ministers under UPA 2 have been disastrous.
Will inflation be as big even on a macroeconomic level? Since you've been looking at macroeconomics and you're looking at Chidambaram's understanding of macroeconomics when he came to power 18 months ago as finance minister, the inflation will continue to bite him. As it has, as it has bitten this UPA 2 government?
No, of course it will. But, I think, and that is what is going to hurt them electorally probably the most. But I think one thing that we're all underestimating here is the fact that macroeconomically, globally, the environment was really, really bad over the last year and a half, and it continues to be bad. The fact that our rupee has now stabilized at 62 rupees to a dollar is actually extremely positive, because there was a real opportunity for us, or a chance for India to actually just go down the other side.
Worse.
It of course could have been worse. So
given that, could have been worse.
Given
but
that,
doesn't mean that he's doing a great job.
I think he's basically
Sumant has injected a necessary corrective, because when the things were going well for the UPA, they did not do the things that were required to be done. For example, Chidambaram in 2008 gave a 70,000 crore rupee farm loan waiver, when they should have been more aggressive in consolidating the fisc. They did not do that, and those problems were stacked for the next term.
They won the elections because of that.
So I would say that when the going was good, these guys did not do the things that were required, and that is why they're paying the penalty now.
Okay, let's on that note, on that slightly sobering note, take a break, because if finance ministers are expected to win elections for political parties, then you're asking them to wear more than one hat. You can't please Sumant Sinha and please the farmer and please Prasenjit Bose. You're riding a tightrope then as finance minister of the country. I mean, the finance minister is not expected to deliver votes. That is Sonia Gandhi's job, we thought, or Rahul Gandhi's job as far as the Congress is now concerned. But to expect Chidambaram to play these various roles, to expect him to be a finance minister appreciated by the markets and the corporate world, and also expect him to deliver votes, is a tough task. Has Chidambaram succeeded? We'll have to wait and see. But one group which is very happy are ex-soldiers today. This has been a long-standing demand, one rank, one pension. We'll get some reactions to that when we return. Now, one of the headlineable proposals that the finance minister has made is one rank, one pension, at least in 4 categories, which has been a long-standing demand of the ex-servicemen of the country. Pallavi Ghosh spoke to an ex-serviceman turned member of parliament, Sumant Sinha. Let's listen in to Mr. Singh.
One rank, one pension, that kind of an announcement is something which Rahul Gandhi has been pushing for, and predictably the Congress party is of course giving credit to Rahul Gandhi for that.
They can take credit for whatever they want. But the reality is that one rank, one pension has been a demand that we in the BJP have been advocating for a very long time. In fact, I was a member of a group that was established in late Mrs. Gandhi's days. Be that as it may, I do welcome the finance minister's announcement, though I would like to see the detail of it, and simultaneously I would have much preferred if the finance minister had found it proper to simultaneously establish a separate pay commission for the armed forces.
Okay, so there is clearly something for the armed forces to cheer. Also for students. Students' loans have been made cheaper. There's a moratorium on some of them. Also the middle class, when it comes to cars, excise duties have been cut. So there will be, cars will immediately get cheaper. Meera Sanyal, as I said, now you're a politician, so you're wearing a very different hat. Do you see this as an election speech that might actually reach out to certain important constituencies? It appeared the government was reaching out to minorities, talking about how much they've done in terms of minority lending. They was reaching out to women, talking about how many women self-help groups have benefited, looking at the middle class, looking at ex-servicemen. Do you believe any of these SOPs, as some would call them, will actually make any political impact?
Well, I think the biggest SOP of all, Rajdeep, which you haven't mentioned, is the moratorium on student loans.
I did mention.
So that's clearly with an eye to the young people. But I will say this, that I think the people of India at this point in time, Rajdeep, are not going to be taken in by these kind of SOPs. What our young people are looking for is enterprise, entrepreneurial, livelihood, job opportunities. And, you know, when you talk about what's happening with the economy, of course it is an election speech. I mean, that's what one would expect.
You know, that's interesting. Are you saying that the Aam Aadmi Party would be able to, what would the Aam Aadmi Party have done, for example?
Free water.
You know, given, you know, if you were in the same situation.
Demonetized.
Well, certainly, I would hope that we wouldn't be in the same situation, because this government has really driven the economy to the ground. We have persistently high inflation. You have a fiscal deficit out of control. You have a current account deficit out of control. And for everyone on the panel who gives the finance minister the credit for getting the rupee back in shape, I think we forget that it is actually the Reserve Bank of India which has done a yeoman job in keeping the rupee stable. Right. So let's talk about what we would have done. Certainly you remove some of the structural barriers to get investment growing. That's the problem in the Indian economy, that no one, including Indian businessmen, have faith in the Indian economy or in investing. That's the reason that our growth is so low. These are structural issues which have to be addressed.
I'm going to look at whether the Aam Aadmi Party is actually going to be able to revive that investor confidence. I'm told Arvind Kejriwal is going to address CII today at 3 o'clock to unveil the Aam Aadmi Party's economic agenda. So we'll look at that carefully. But Raj Kadian, General Raj Kadian of the Ex-Servicemen's League, who's been a driving force for one rank, one pension, joins us. General Kadian, your first reactions, is this exactly what you wanted, or only a small step towards one rank, one pension?
Rajdeep, at the moment the announcement has been made only in the concept form, and I have no doubt the government will work out, the bureaucracy will work out the nuts and bolts. My first reaction is I am very happy for the entire nearly 25 lakh ex-servicemen all over the country. And it's a very, very happy moment. It was a fight for justice and equity, not really for money. That's why we were sure.
Sir, does it extend to all ranks, or at the moment there's some confusion whether only specific ranks will get this benefit at the moment?
No, this will extend to everyone from a sepoy to a general. This benefits everybody.
Okay.
So all the demand was that old and the new pensioners must remain at par, because the services rendered are equal. So the pension must be equal. This is the concept.
Okay, so you believe that it has in a sense been, are you going to give Rahul Gandhi the credit like the Congress wants to give, or do you believe that this is simply, as Jaswant Singh pointed out, a demand since Indira Gandhi's days?
Well, his intervention 3 days ago provided the final spark.
Yes.
But I am sure it is the party's policy, although I wish it had come earlier, and I also wish it had come without our having to publicly struggle for it. In fact, Rahul Gandhi, when I met him 3 days ago, he himself used the term. He said, I quote, I believe the soldiers should be given their dues without their having to ask for it.
Well,
unquote. I wish this had been followed in practice by the Congress government in the last 6 years that we've been struggling for it.
General Kadian, appreciate your joining us, but that's the problem many would say with the Congress, that it requires Rahul Gandhi suddenly to wake up to the whole concept of one rank, one pension for the government to galvanize itself. I mean, that perhaps reveals part of the problems in UPA too, that that the armed forces agitators have to go to Rahul Gandhi to get their voice heard. What does that tell us? Where's the Prime Minister? Should they have gone to the Prime Minister's house? Should they have gone to Sonia Gandhi? They go to Rahul Gandhi and get their demand heard, Dr. Baru. What does that say?
This is an old tactic. Whenever the government decides to do something, they then give the credit to Rahul. It's not the first time. I remember in...
No, but this demand has been pending for the last several years.
So therefore, once the government decides to concede the demand, then you stage an event where Rahul gets the credit. I can tell you another incident, 2007, when Manmohan Singh announced that NRGGA will be, cover the entire country. That was not reported, and party didn't take credit on that day. Next day, Rahul called on Manmohan Singh and submitted a memorandum, and then the party said that the decision has been taken because he submitted the memorandum. They got the timing wrong. Otherwise, normally the demand is made before the announcement.
but you see, but somewhere there is the story of the UPA. Somewhere in that, in what might seem amusing here at the moment, is the story of this UPA government. I mean, there's this rush now to take credit or give credit to Rahul Gandhi. But what about all that's gone wrong in the last 9 years? Who's going to... I mean, poor Chidambaram takes the flak for everything that goes wrong.
I think and all the credit goes to the Gandhi family. the question you asked us, how do you rate Chidambaram as a finance minister? I think that question should be asked to Rahul Gandhi, and I think after that you'll get the cue for the rest of the Congress party's assessment.
Because you see, that is partly, Vivian, the problem with this UPA government, that, you've had different interest groups working at variance with each other. The National Advisory Council of Sonia Gandhi had her own views on where the economy should be and her policy makers. Rahul Gandhi, we still don't know, but the general impression is that he's closer to his mother than he is perhaps to what Chidambaram and Manmohan Singh would want. Do you believe that that has been fundamentally a reason for this dissonance, particularly in UPA too?
In fact, the party and the government seem to be leading in different directions. I don't think there is much of a coherence. But on this Rahul Gandhi bit, I think, what the UPA, what the ex-servicemen did was they first went to Narendra Modi. In fact, the Narendra Modi addressed a couple of rallies of the ex-servicemen and Jajjar and other places. And that is what galvanized Rahul Gandhi into adopting one rank, one pension as the Congress.
So maybe that's the tactic. If any agitator today, whether you're a student who wants your student loan waived off, or whether you're a soldier who wants one rank, one pension, go quickly to Narendra Modi, try and get him to accept your demand, and then rush to Rahul Gandhi.
And it's not one rank, one pension, because even Chidambaram mentioned that we accepted it in principle, but we're going to give it, for these 4 ranks, and the limited amount of 500 crore has been allocated.
Sure.
And I think it's just closing the gap. There's no parity.
We'll check exactly.
But on a more serious note, I think this entire vote on account, which was aimed at lowering the element of discontent within the middle classes. As far as the other classes are concerned, it was not a very targeted allotment.
But do you
I
think
that was really quite.
Do you think that's happened?
I don't think it's likely to happen, but that was the intention.
Mobile phones becoming cheaper, cars becoming cheaper. Yeah. Is that enough to address the discontent among the middle class? Because let's be clear, UPA 1 benefited from the urban middle class strongly supporting it in 2009. Every indication is that this is the class drifting away from it. Can one vote on account of vote of thanks, as you've called it, change any of that?
I doubt it, Rajdeep. I think it's just way too late in the day now. I think opinions have been formed, voting patterns have been decided, and I think now for cars becoming 2% cheaper for the next 3-4 months, or handsets becoming cheaper, I don't think that's really going to cut it.
And I don't think Prasanjit even believes that having cheaper cars is any way to run a country.
Especially
right?
SUVs.
Especially SUVs.
Especially
that's
SUVs.
what worries.
I think there was no case to cut.
Are you telling me no left leader ever drives an SUV? Am I to understand that the left leaders don't drive nice cars and SUVs?
Those who are driving, left leaders driving SUVs are being hypocrites.
Sorry?
Have you been to the parking lot in Parliament? Get your cameraman to go to the parking lot in Parliament. They are all SUVs.
Including left leaders? I thought left leaders are more likely to go to the wagon.
I don't know about left.
But I don't think so. Left. I mean, I think they haven't yet graduated.
But anyway,
the point. Do you believe middle class discontent has been addressed or not? Yes or no?
No. And not only middle class, I think that it is wrong to presume that in 2009 the UPA government won only because of the middle class. I think they got substantive support from the peasantry, from the rural areas. I think one after the other, the different classes of society have abandoned the UPA 1, and the most important reason is because of inflation.
Okay, I think that's the issue that we will tackle next, because I think inflation is critical. As we say, no government really can be re-elected in an era of double-digit inflation. It's never happened in the history of Indian elections. And low growth. A combination of high inflation and low growth could well be the critical factor come election time. Let's take a break. When we come back, more voices, including politicians, joining us on our panel. Back in a moment.